there is a new way of working and there will be a new way of working. But essentially, the way I like to describe this is we were all on Earth running around in our jeans and, our shirts and our T-shirts and our jackets. And, we would walk easily, run easily. We could do what we wanted to do. Unfortunately, Earth got obliterated by an asteroid, and we're now on the moon. And on the moon, you can't run, you got to jump. The gravity is different. We've got to wear a suit.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Leadership Stack Podcast, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs to increase your leadership, teamwork, and profits. This is your host, Sean C., aka Mr. CEO at 22.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the CEO says. Their behavior helps define the culture. And if they're not aware of that, that's where your culture can go wrong. Because saying one thing and behaving in another creates disconnect in your team. And being aware of that disconnect will help you overcome that. But essentially, the CEO is fundamentally responsible for the culture of the company.
Is it possible to establish a strong culture in a remote work environment, especially to new hires, the people who have just come in the team and they came not in the office, they came in a Zoom meeting, and that's all they're going to be having until we see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, this is where a lot of companies are struggling right now. So the first part of the question is it possible to create a strong culture in a remote environment? It's not only possible, it's critical. If you don't do this, the glue between your people will degrade. And you will lose them both morally, from a morale perspective, from a productivity perspective, from an engagement perspective, and maybe from a team perspective, because people are looking for stability and they are looking for purpose and they are looking for that connection. And they're looking for that from the company because they can't get it from their friends. They can't get it from their family. They can't get it from the gym. They can't get it from going for a run because often that's not available in this pandemic moment. So talking about companies that are transitioning, this is quite a hard thing to do. And I want to actually use this podcast, Sean, to give your leaders and the companies that they run the permission to grieve. We can grieve. You can grieve and you can mourn for the death of pre-COVID work. It's dead. It's not coming back. There will be a new way of working. There is a new way of working and there will be a new way of working. But essentially, the way I like to describe this is we were all on Earth running around in our jeans and, our shirts and our T-shirts and our jackets. And, we would walk easily, run easily. We could do what we wanted to do. Unfortunately, Earth got obliterated by an asteroid and we're now on the moon. And on the moon, you can't run, you got to jump. The gravity is different. We've got to wear a suit. That's the way I describe this to my customers. You cannot think back to what happened on Earth and think, but this isn't the same. I prefer that way because that way's changed now. You will not have work the way it was. You can grieve for it and get over it as a company and move forward because this is new. And so companies that are thinking, we can recruit the way we recruited, or we can onboard the way we onboarded, are naive and it's dangerous. Because without documentation, without defining your culture, how does a new person sitting in their lounge learn about your culture? How do they learn about your company's processes? How do they learn about how you do things without documenting effectively, without demonstrating the structure, without building the social connection? They will not meet their team. So you've got to really rethink recruitment. You've got to rethink all of your processes. You've got to define more processes. So in remote, Andreas Klinger used to be the head of remote for AngelList, and he's now a VC. And he said that you need 5 times the processes in a remote environment than you do in a co-located environment. So if you were a team of 10 in an office environment and you've now gone remote, you need to think about operating as if you were a team of 50. That's the amount of structure, process, organization, and discipline that you need to run your organization better. So I really think there is this transition to a hybrid or remote work environment is going to take a lot more thought than most leaders realize.
I learned a lot from that, but I want us to take it a little bit more down to earth, more tactical. Let's say I have a new hire coming in. How do you suggest that we are able to teach or to share our culture with this new hire? How can this new hire be immersed with our team's culture? Are there steps, softwares, etc. that we can use and utilize?
The first thing that has to happen is you have to define your culture, because you can't teach it if it's not defined. Osmosis isn't going to happen anymore. So without osmosis, we're lost. But if you define your culture, then you've got to document it. And so one of the things that remote companies do very, very well, the successful ones, is documentation. And it's documentation to a whole new level to what we're used to and what we typically would expect, even in a co-located environment. Let's assume you've documented your culture. The best onboarding programs do not aim for productivity. Productivity is an outcome of aiming for removing anxiety, developing trust, and building relationships with that new person. Relationships build trust, trust builds success, trust builds the ability to work effectively. You need to help the new joiner understand the invisible currents, the way we do things around here, of the culture. And typically, remote companies use a buddy system for that. You need to allow the new joiner to demonstrate their strengths quickly, not start work, demonstrate their strengths. So you need to understand what their strengths are so that they can demonstrate it to you and to them. And then you need to create an environment of psychological safety where the new joiner can be themselves and feel they can bring themselves to your work environment. Then you will get productivity. You have to remember that the onboarding experience serves as the first experience of your culture post-interview. So if your onboarding experience is rubbish, then your culture comes across as rubbish. The best onboarding programs start -30, -15 days, -10 days, -5 days, -4, -3, -2, or -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. And companies have a communication cadence around this. So this is who communicates at -15. This is who communicates and what at -10. The whole point around doing this and documenting this is to overcome the loss of osmosis. If a new joiner joins the sales team and the sales team is 7 people, if you don't document this and you don't demonstrate it effectively during the onboarding, that new joiner now has to call each one of your sales team and say, how do you work? That's at least 1 day of wasted time in terms of man hours that should have been documented, where they could have just read through it at day -30, where you gave them access to the intranet or access to the documentation. The companies that do this the best are companies like GitLab. So GitLab is, they are the granddaddies of remote, really. They went from less than 100 people in 2016 to 1,300 people in 2020, fully remote. And their online company manual is something like, if you printed it out, 8,000 pages.
Wow.
You can go and read it now, and you can go and have a look at it. It explains everything. They see the company manual as a competitive advantage, and they hire for people who are able to document, who are able to write well, because that's how they work. So
wow.
there are different companies in the remote environment, but they all do documentation well, because how else do you onboard somebody? How else do you get them up to speed? What I'm telling you is, as a new joiner, your colleagues will say to you, hi, if you want to know about how to work with engineering, look at this link. If you want to work out how to work with marketing, look at this link. If you want to understand about our values, look at this link. And actually, you'll go and look at that page, and then you will get drawn to other pages. It's a very beautifully, it's actually poetry in documentation structure. It's beautiful the way you can get lost in the document. And so the problem with office-based environments is the human being was actually the bottleneck. So the bottleneck was my ability to get time to learn from you. Now at GitLab, there's no bottleneck. I can read and learn as much as I like. Obviously, I'm not, there are probably, I don't know, maybe 300 pages on the team. So you can go and learn. The whole team is documented there. So you can go and learn about who they are, where they work, what they like, where they live, their jobs, what they do, and you can see the links that are important to them. You can go and understand how DevOps works. You can go and see how you learn everything about the company. It's an absolute, it's a serious competitive advantage.
It is.
It's there. It's open. You can learn anything about that company. I do. I read it all the time. I just go and read the GitLab manual for fun.
Wow, that's all. I'm sure people would learn from that, and I'm sure you are learning from that. That has helped your career. That's interesting. That's very, very good to know. So documentation, I would have to look at how we can do that well in SEO Hacker. We have process documents, onboarding, but we are definitely not anywhere near 1,000 pages even.
There are 9 best practices that remote work companies do over and above what we would typically do. And the reason I know this is because I started developing software for remote companies. I started researching GitLab, GitHub, Automatic, Buffer, Hotjar, TopTal, Zapier, and a bunch of others. And so these 9 best practices, one of them is documentation. Another one is communication, building process, developing structure, being really, really disciplined and good about social connection, building trust, enhancing trust, being results and outcomes driven from a leadership point of view, working hard on recruitment and onboarding, being very aware of mental health, burnout, and wellness, and then generally being deliberate about culture. So these are the 9 things that remote companies have to do because they don't have an office to do it for them.
It's interesting because you mentioned leadership. How do you lead remotely? How is it that when you're a leader, how can you just motivate and inspire your team remotely? It's
not your job to motivate and inspire. It is partly, but not really. It's your job to create, to coach, to create the environment for your people to succeed and to understand how your people are. So their leaders in office-based environments were motivators, were typically alpha, were loud, like the spotlight, rah, rah, rah. Okay. That doesn't work in remote. This is one of the mind shifts that is still going to have to take place in this new work world we live in, because remote work requires organization. It requires structure as a leader. You need to know where your people are. You need to know what they're doing. You need to know how they are doing. Remote companies spend a lot more time doing one-to-ones that have nothing to do with work. It's just, how are you? How are you doing? Because that used to happen in an office and it doesn't happen anymore. So leaders are more like coaches. They are more like facilitators than they are motivators and come on, we got to do this. It's a different leadership style that 99% of companies have not even thought about yet, is how do we actually lead effectively? If you're a micromanager, as I said earlier, you will end up burning your people out because they will work longer and harder to demonstrate to you that they are working, and they won't get any downtime and they will eventually burn out. But leadership is another whole area that the change of how we lead is going to have to happen.
This episode is partnered up with Armory.ph. Armory is an online watch store and is the exclusive distributor of the brands TW Steel, Dion Milano, Fonderia, Luminox, and Mondane in the Philippines. Yes, folks, those are Italian watch brands. If you are looking to buy your next go-to luxurious everyday watch, go to Armory.ph and enter the coupon code LS30. Armory.ph delivers straight to your doorstep with a security tape to make sure that your package is safe from theft, arrives on time, and is guaranteed working 100%. Go to armory.ph and buy your first luxury watch today.
No matter gaano kaganda yung presentations mo, no matter gaano kaganda yung product knowledge deck mo, if these people are not aligned with what you want to do, it won't work.